And tonight on the Daily Wrap, President Obama making a bid to diversify wealthy neighborhoods as Hillary Clinton prepares to unveil her economic agenda. But can she shake the Clintons' new elitist image? And find out why Al-Qaeda is reportedly on the verge of bankruptcy. We discuss and debate all of that with Ellis Hennigan, Amy Holmes, and Carl Higbie. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show tonight. I'm flying solo tonight, and my co-host, Rick Unger, unfortunately out tonight. But in his stead, we have popular television and radio commentator and best-selling author, Ellis Hennigan. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
You're the better-looking, more liberal.
I'm no Unger. I'm no Unger, but I'll do my best. What can I tell you?
Nobody is no Unger, that is for sure. From the Blaze TV, news anchor and former speechwriter for former Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, Amy Holmes joins us. Amy.
Thank you. A pleasure.
You're looking well.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, last but not least, well, maybe least, former Navy SEAL and congressional candidate. His name is Carl Higbie. Carl.
Thanks for having me back on.
Outstanding. Nice watch, by the way. We like it.
Thank you.
All right. Let's get right to the Daily Download. And the Obama administration is under fire for what one Republican says is an attempt to create an unrealistic utopia. This, as the Department of Housing and Urban Development is about to unveil new regulations that would offer grant money to communities willing to build affordable housing within affluent neighborhoods. Arizona Republican Congressman Paul Gosar is trying to block the rule. He tells The Hill, and we quote, "American citizens and communities should be free to choose where they would like to live and not be subject to federal neighborhood engineering at the behest of an overreaching federal government," unquote. Affordable housing advocates are applauding the rule, with one official telling The Hill, and we got more quotes, "This rule is not about forcing anyone to live anywhere they don't want to. It's really about addressing long-standing practices that prevent people from living where they want to." Okay. Also under the new HUD rules, poor neighborhoods would get federal money to improve those communities through better schools, parks, libraries, grocery stores, etc. Is this another government overreach, as some Republicans contend, Mr. Hennigan?
Ridiculous. First of all good stuff in the housing gets done by the federal government. And you remember the Fair Housing Act, right? That never would have happened, where it's just the market. Sadly, we have prejudice in our hearts. We don't want all of America to become a gated community. The idea of using incentives, which is really an effective, in fact, kind of market-based approach to this, is actually going to have some good results. And it works lots of places, including New York City, where we are sitting right now, where big, fat, rich developers get extra goodies if they'll put a few affordable apartments inside their buildings. It's an excellent thing, and I would welcome America to enjoy the benefits as well.
Amy, you're nodding your head violently in agreement with Ellis.
Was I? Because I would say,
it's
speak for
opposite
yourself. I don't have this discrimination you're talking about in my heart. And in fact, a lot of rich real estate New York developers say there's not enough middle-class housing in New York, and that's one of the big problems that's happening in Manhattan. But I would make the argument that when we talk about diversity, or when the federal government talks about diversity, they only talk about certain neighborhoods. Are we saying that African American families that have fled Washington, D.C., for example, where I used to live, to move out to Prince George's County, to move into those middle class neighborhoods, should now be forced to diversify with the neighborhood that they actually left to put their kids into better schools? Are we saying that Little Havana should have to diversify because there are too many Cubans? No, obviously we're only talking about one community, and I think in fact that's discriminatory.
Carl?
Look, if you want to take federal dollars, my tax dollars, and put them into putting people that can't afford certain houses in neighborhoods that they can't afford to be in, guess what? You're going to create a problem with people wanting to move out of that neighborhood. Then that neighborhood will subsequently fall to a lower standard of living, because people who are living in those neighborhoods that can't afford to live in the high-priced areas, the issue is that they're never going to assimilate to that lifestyle. It's a very cliquey lifestyle on the 1%. It's a very cliquey lifestyle on the bottom 1%.
I would love to live in a gorgeous multi-million-dollar apartment on the Upper East Side, but I can't because I can't afford it. I'm not asking the federal government to diversify those apartments so that I have that opportunity. I'm thinking, you know what, that's probably out of reach and probably will be for the rest of my life. I think that these market incentives that you're talking about need to be left to the private market, not to the federal government trying to engineer and redistribute people.
But Amy, here's the reality. Everything about the housing industry has to do with federal policy, right? The fact that in your mortgage you get a tax deduction. That is a
That's
huge,
not true in New York City. New York City has
impact.
rent control that is city controlled, not federal controlled.
Every single aspect of the housing business. The fact that, let me repeat again, the fact that your mortgage payments, the interest on your mortgage is deductible. If we took that federal goodie away, it would dramatically change the housing industry.
If you have a mortgage. A lot of people don't. I don't.
Well, you know what? One day with these incentives, you too might have a mortgage,
I had a
and you'll
mortgage,
get great
I don't
tax
anymore.
deductions.
Sort itself out. Let the private sector sort itself out. Let people who want to live in nice neighborhoods who can afford to live there. If you can't afford to, don't live there.
And by the way, discriminating based on race
Not discrimination.
is illegal.
Dividing.
That has happened
Dividing.
to me. I've been discriminated based on race in Washington,
Did
D.C.
you want the government to stop that?
Of course I wanted the government to
Good.
stop it, but I also moved up the street to an apartment that was actually a lot nicer.
Interesting. It's funny you mentioned Manhattan as far as the middle class being driven out. The Manhattan population is actually lower than it was in World War II, which is astounding to think
because
about.
people don't have kids like they used to.
But it's also because you don't have families.
There are actually
More corporations.
there are actually more housing units in Manhattan than there were before, but they don't have 9 children in most of them.
Right.
Which is
The
too
Irish
bad.
probably left. That's probably why.
Where are the Irish and the Jews when you need them?
Exactly. Well, one's right here, actually. So, meanwhile, Nobel Prize economist Joseph Stiglitz says the United States should take a page from the social democracies of Scandinavia if we want to address income inequality. Stiglitz says the deck is stacked against the bottom third of the United States.
There are many other countries where you would be much better off. Your health would be better, your exposure to environmental hazards would be lower, where your income, even your income, would be higher. Your prospects of going from the bottom third where you are to the top third would be much higher.
And the music's a nice touch.
Try not
Well,
to-
Stiglitz also says the U.S. needs to slow the growth of the top 1%, and that includes higher taxes on capital gains and dividends. As for the middle class, he says the minimum wage should be raised up to $15 an hour in many cities. A prescription for income inequality, or is this class warfare, Mr. Higbee?
Class warfare for sense of politics. Look, if you raise minimum wage to $15 an hour, you're going to do what happened in Connecticut with McDonald's, where they raised minimum wage to $10.10. Now they're putting LCD screens where people were once tellers at McDonald's is. You've lost jobs because of that increase, and that's going to happen across the board.
That's true, and I brought that up on the show before, Ellis, where if we raise the minimum wage, I have a feeling corporations will just say, okay, in the case of fast food, we could just put a kiosk there where you order your food, and we don't even have to hire you anymore.
So by your argument, we should cut it in half, maybe.
What's that?
The minimum wage.
Oh,
maybe
God,
$1, no
there
minimum
should be no
wage. What
minimum
would you
wage.
like?
What
Listen,
I wrote
here's
about, you asked a
I
question.
understand.
You asked
Listen.
a question. Let me answer it. Thank you. So there is always room for compromise. I was a sports writer first before I got into this business, and $15 is on one end, and $7.50 is on the other.
No, so some people argue for zero.
I'm not
I bet
arguing
you
for
for
zero.
zero.
I say
For
no
zero
minimum wage.
minimum
No, he's
wage?
for no minimum wage.
No, but I can
Some
tell
people
you
okay.
sure, but I can tell you
I'm at
in
where it currently is
Seattle-
right now.
Look, can I make this point? though?
Sure.
Listen, here's the reality. I mean, I understand all the theories, and they kind of philosophically sometimes, but here's the reality. More and more wealth in our country is being held in fewer and fewer hands, and it becomes more and more egregious every single year. At some
surprised it's
point,
happened under a
these
Democratic
are-
president.
there's all kind of forces that are bigger, frankly, than any president that are pushing it in that direction. And at some point or another, decent people do need to step forward and say, wait a second, we don't want to have one person have all the money in the world. We need to do some policy steps, and this is amenable to policy that can actually give middle and working people a bigger chance.
Okay, so you're at 0, you're at 15. Where are you, Amy?
Here's the reality, as you like to put it. In Seattle, where they did raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, one of the top chefs there, who owns about 10 restaurants, is talking about how he's going to have to close 3 because he can't afford the labor costs. So those are people who don't have jobs because of raising the minimum wage. It has also become news in Seattle that the reason why the unions were fighting to raise the minimum wage is they actually exempted themselves. So that means that businesses are now incentivized to hire union members who they don't have to pay the minimum wage. It's actually this shell game that's being driven by unions, at least in Seattle.
Which is also happening in LA right now. And the fact of the matter is, you have to, from a business standpoint, you have to look, does this person add more than $15 an hour to the value of my company? The answer is probably no if they're flipping burgers, so you can't afford to pay them $15. It's simple math.
Ellis, final word?
There's going to be people flipping burgers because we want to eat burgers. This is always the claim every single time the minimum
And your
wage goes
burger
up.
will be
It never
$15.
turns out to be true. All the money shouldn't be in just a few hands.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a $15 burger. There's actually one on the Upper East Side that's like 24 bucks, and it's really no different than anything.
And the
you get
place is
with
packed.
Upper East Side.
The place is packed.
rich
Right.
people.
Victory to
Coming up next, as Hillary Clinton prepares to lay out her economic plan this weekend, Bill is contradicting her on her email use. What's going on? Keep it right here. This is Newsmax. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with Ellis Hennigan, Amy Holmes, and Carl Higbee. Well, Bill and Hillary Clinton may need to get their story straight. And this as Mr. Clinton appeared to contradict Mrs. Clinton when it comes to her email use. The former president said a few months ago that he's only sent 2 emails in his life. A spokesman at the time said one went to U.S. troops and the other went to former astronaut John Glenn. I've sent 3 and 2 of mine have gone there as well. But just a few months ago, the other was booking Amy for tonight. But just a few months ago, Hillary Clinton, defending the use of a private email server, Secretary of State, said her private server contained personal communications between her and the former president. So I guess this all depends on what your definition of the word is, Amy. What's going on? A, do you believe Bill Clinton that he only sent 2 emails in his entire life?
You know, sadly, I believe his version more than hers. When she says,
Because she sent 55,000.
Right, no, but when she says that, I use my personal email to be, emailing my husband, etc. I think we remember when the New York Times did an investigation into the Clintons and how little time they actually do spend together. So it doesn't surprise me if they don't have the warmest email relationship. But it seems like the Clintons can't get their story straight. If you remember, Hillary said she only had 1 private email address. It has since come to light she has at least 2 private email addresses. One that she used with her consigliere, Sidney Blumenthal, to actually discuss policy, not just private things. Hillary Clinton, she's already suffering politically from this email disaster in terms of her trust numbers, and those are going down. And interestingly, as the Washington Post and ABC News reported, that decline is being driven by Democrats who are losing faith in Hillary Clinton.
That's right. Bernie Sanders is getting huge crowds in Iowa, and he actually within 8 points in Wisconsin in one poll that came out earlier this week. Else, here's what I want to ask you, because we can't prove one way or another how many emails Bill Clinton sent, so it's speculation.
Really don't care.
What's that?
You don't care, right?
Well, yeah, I care that he only said he sent 2, and I have a hard time believing that. But here's what I want to know. Are you surprised at the campaign that Hillary has run to this point in terms of not talking to the press, being off key, Bill saying I got to pay my bills when I asked him about the speeches and are you going to continue to do it? It seems like they're excellent politicians. I think we could all agree. Bill Clinton, anyway, is an excellent politician. Hillary, maybe not so much. Yeah, he has. And people admire him for that. But they seem off key. They don't seem in sync. I don't see a good campaign being run so far.
Yeah, it's always a mistake to run a front-runners campaign. It's so tempting, right? I mean, you're 40 points ahead in the polls or 50 points ahead in the polls, and so you run to the rose garden, or at least the theoretical rose garden. And, at some point you wake up. Someone starts coming up. I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to be the Democratic nominee. I mean, I hear your figures, but I still don't think he's going to make
I'm just
the
surprised
sale.
he's even making somewhat of a race out of
But
it.
also, listen, I mean, we're smart enough to understand, she has some huge advantages in this fight, right? I mean, tons of money, humongous support, weak opponents. I mean, most likely she's going to be the nominee.
So you agree with her not speaking to the press?
No, I hate
in
it.
Capacity?
I hate it. I want to read every single
But to your
probe
point,
in her brain.
But to your point about Bill and Hillary seeming to be out of sync and not having the same story that they need to be sticking to, it points to the fact that they both run very separate organizations. The staff around him while he's traveling the world, giving speeches, collecting $500,000 and possibly influencing public
Bill's
policy.
gotta be paid, right?
Right. And Hillary
bills.
Clinton, as Secretary of State and United States Senator, she has her staff around her, and I think the Clinton team, Clinton Inc., is going to have to figure out how to integrate that.
Okay, Carl, last word.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. One of the Clintons not been above board, right? He didn't inhale. He did not have sexual relations with that woman. I think it's only a matter of time before these scandals like the email one and like the Benghazi thing are really going to come out in the front of the media, and that's going to be a big deal.
Then I'm curious what happens. Then does a Mike Bloomberg jump in? Does a Joe Biden jump in? Zero, because you're saying there's no alternative.
Here's the thing. No, it's just
And
it's
15
not
seconds,
only,
just
it's not
quickly,
only
'cause we've gotta move
alternative.
on.
It's the fact that the Clintons have been part of our life for 3 decades now,
Yeah.
and little piddly things like that are not going to change anything. They really aren't.
And that will be the last
Lovers, haters, everybody feel the same way.
All right. Mrs. Clinton will be here in New York this weekend to give what's billed as a major speech on her economic vision. But there will be one noticeable absence. Democratic New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. He tells Capital New York he's still waiting to hear Hillary's larger vision, to address income inequality. So is this snub from the man who successfully ran her 2000 Senate campaign? Are you surprised by this?
I mean, people, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party doesn't embrace all things about Mrs. Clinton. She's way too moderate, way too hawkish. I mean, there's lots of people on the left of the Democratic Party who are withholding support and will ultimately most likely come around, but they're not enthusiasts.
Of course, this is a snub. A Democratic mayor of New York City in the state that Hillary Clinton represented as a United States Senator, refusing to meet with her when she's supposed to be the front runner of the Democratic Party to become President of the United States. You'd think they'd at least have coffee.
True. Carl, you're a big fan of de Blasio.
Yeah, huge fan. What's his future plans? That's what I want to know. He's doing this to make a statement so he can build momentum behind himself for something.
For a presidential run in 2020. Perhaps.
Maybe
Good
another
Lord.
seat.
I thought he wouldn't get one term as mayor.
Yeah.
I've heard talk of people saying, wow, he could be a future presidential
This
candidate.
could be a big stance because I think the media is turning
De
against
Blasio
it.
Warren?
Who was the last mayor of New York elected president?
Let's see. It wasn't Rudy Giuliani, I can say that. Moving on the Republican side, potential 2016 hopeful Jeb Bush is touting his foreign policy credentials, meeting with the president of Poland in Warsaw. But it's the foreign policy of his brother George that remains a concern for former Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn.
I like Jeb Bush. But the fact is his last name will kill 47% of the votes for him, potential votes in this country. That's a big deal to get over.
Carl, what is it with that number 47 that just keeps coming up in campaigns?
It's close to 50, but it's not powerful. I think, and I like Jeb Bush. I've met him. I think he's a really great guy. I think he's the only person that can definitively lose to Hillary.
Definitively
Really?
lose.
Why?
Yeah.
Because you agree
Because
with
of the
Coburn.
name. I agree.
Because of the name.
Because of
but
the
she
name.
has a name also that,
but
has
Bush
baggage
came
as
after
well.
Clinton.
Here's what I would
So
say,
it's more
though.
recent
The
than
Clinton
people's
brand, when you look back at that presidency in the 90s,
Yeah.
is favorable.
That's true, yeah,
And the
yeah.
Bush brand, maybe not so
A bit
much.
tarnished.
Right, exactly. So do you think that there are enough low information voters out there who say, well, he's a Bush, I'm not going to vote for him, I don't care if he is the smarter, better version of the Bush brothers?
I think it's up to Jeb Bush to define himself. Obviously, it's an obstacle and it's a hurdle. I don't know where the 47% comes. That's just also the number of Democrats who won't vote for a
It
Republican.
is odd, that's true. Ellis, we got to go, but when we come back, is Al-Qaeda going bankrupt? Stay tuned. And welcome back to The Wrap. Well, a day after the Pentagon announced plans to send up to 450 additional U.S. troops to Iraq, the military now says it's considering building more bases in that country to help drive back ISIS. We're now joined by Jim Hansen. He's the Executive VP with the Center for Security Policy. Jim has also served in the Army Special Forces. Jim, thanks for joining us from Arlington tonight. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So what would the value be in building more U.S. militaries in Iraq, and how quickly could that be accomplished, and where will these be built? Will these be in, the Sunni provinces where the fighting is most heated right now?
I don't understand why we need to build more bases. What we need to do is get the troops we have off the bases and out on combat missions with the Iraqis. I mean, the Iraqis are poorly led, relatively poorly trained, and they need command and control help. They need fire support coordination. They need people to call in airstrikes. And they need somebody to make sure they don't just run off the battlefield and leave several thousand Humvees for our enemies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim. I was about to ask, is it also about motivation for Iraqi troops as well? I mean, they're going against people that will die for their cause, and the Iraqi troops are basically working for, we were talking about minimum wage before, for a paycheck. And if things get bad, maybe they're like, well, I'm not beholden necessarily to the central Iraqi government. I don't even know who I'm fighting for. It's just a paycheck. Is that playing a role here as well?
It absolutely is. And in addition to that, most of the troops in the Iraqi army are Shia. So ISIS is in the Sunni areas. And the motivation of these Shia troops to go and die to free Sunni areas is pretty low. So I think those two things combined make them very poorly motivated. And it's hard to get them to fight. And obviously they aren't fighting well. So they need a lot more help than 450 more advisors who are going to have to stay on the bases.
Okay, I'm going to promote you right here on national television. You're now President of the United States. How many U.S. troops would you send in there?
I'm not sure, tens of thousands at least, and I would send them potentially to work with the Sunnis. I would send some to work with the Kurds. I would arm both the Kurds and the Sunnis independent of the Iraqi government, because the Iraqi government has been keeping them unsupplied on purpose because they don't want anybody up against them. And then I would let our troops lead and operate with both of those organizations and potentially the Iraqi army too. And if that happens and we cut the airstrikes loose, let the special operators loose, we got a chance to take ISIS down.
Okay. Jim, let me just go to Carl real quick because he's one with military experience and has been in that region. So you were giving a thumbs up to several things that Jim was saying.
I did. The tens of thousands of troops, it's absolutely required. I would arm nobody except for ourselves. I would go in there. We trained these guys for 10 years to no avail. They did not learn. They did not want to learn. They don't care. They're not accountable enough and they're not intelligent enough to effectively execute this mission. We need to commit our own resources and do this on our terms, which unfortunately will lead to a lot of Iraqi collateral damage.
Ellis, I have a feeling that we're going to get an opposite answer from
Carl is absolutely half right. I mean, I'm ready to give up. I mean, we don't want to save any countries that don't want to be saved. And every evidence is that these are people who do not want to save a unified Iraq.
Wouldn't that affect our national security?
It might, and there are things we got to do in order to avoid that. I think encouraging turn it into 3 states. Maybe Joe Biden was right a few years ago when he was talking about that.
Sunni, Shia.
But I will say this: no more American deaths defending that place. We've already given it the office with our blood, our treasure, and I say no more.
Amy?
I would actually just ask Jim this question. I agree kind of with both of my colleagues here at the table that ISIS is, of course, a national security threat to the United States, and an Iraq that's falling apart obviously has created a vacuum that allows ISIS to gain territory and resources. Is there a strategy where U.S. troops defeat ISIS definitively, leave Iraq to Iraqis, and we don't have to revisit this problem 10 years from now?
You know, I think there is. And in what might be the biggest shock tonight, I'm going to agree with Ellis. Let's partition Iraq. Let's let Baghdad and Iran work together for their Shia state. The Kurds essentially have their own state. And let's let the Sunni have their own state. The tribal leaders there will have the potential and the will to go ahead and take out ISIS. And then we don't have 3 groups that don't get along trapped in a state that was only drawn up for post-colonial reasons.
That's interesting, Jim. Let me just ask you about this report out today in The Guardian that says Al-Qaeda is losing money and manpower to ISIS to the point where they may be going bankrupt. Is ISIS now the new big terror group, and because their propaganda machine is so, I don't want to use impressive, but it is powerful, is that why ISIS is winning this war against Al-Qaeda as far as being the #1 recruiter of jihadists around the world?
Well, that's part of it. The other thing is ISIS has been tremendously successful, and they took territory. They planted the black flag, they declared a caliphate, and now Boko Haram has declared loyalty, a couple groups in Libya, groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. They're an intercontinental caliphate. That's pretty important, and unfortunately for us, that's a sad thing because it makes us look weak. They look like the strong horse.
Okay, Jim. Well, thanks so much for joining us from Washington. We appreciate it, sir.
Pleasure to be with you.
Fortunately, guys, we got to go, but I'm sure we'll discuss this at another time. Interesting topic indeed, and I did not see that agreeing with you thing coming.
Nice, right?
Yeah.
Those coalitions.
Al, coming up next, the drama grows as the House gets ready to vote on the president's trade agenda. He's on the side of the Republicans against Democrats. Everything's upside down. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Daily Wrap. Before we get going here, I want to hear your thoughts on the issues we're talking about tonight. Go to newsmax.com/comments and let us know. We may read 1 or 2 on the air if you're lucky. Anyway, in a rare show of bipartisanship, President Obama and House Republicans are on the same side of an issue. It's true. They're both pushing for the passage of a trade agreement with Pacific nations, with a vote expected tomorrow.
We've worked to address the concerns of members on both sides of the aisle, and we've accepted both substantive and procedural changes proposed by House Democrats. This vote's about doing what's right for the country.
Now, the bill has drawn opposition from Democrats, many of them supported by unions who argue that expanded global trade will cost jobs at home. Will the White House be able to get Democrats in line for this vote, Ms. Holmes?
That's an interesting question, and the White House, I'm sure, would like to know the answer to that, but I think they'd also be willing to pass this trade agreement with Republican support if that's what it takes. But
You mean the Hastert rule is done?
Well, I'm saying that the White House, the White House is willing.
Remember that guy?
I remember. He's been in the news
Right.
lately.
Well, the White House is willing to, score a touchdown with Republicans on the team if that's what it takes. But what I find troubling here is that this would be closed to public comment, that the public can't know what's in the trade agreement and then contact their representative to say if they like it or they don't like it. The democratic process seems to be getting short-circuited here.
Let me get the boys involved in a second, because you are doing what's called transitioning for me. You helped my segue, which is,
It's my
meanwhile,
pleasure.
thank you, Amy. She is
She's
a
a
pro.
pro.
She is a pro. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Paul Ryan had a Nancy Pelosi-esque moment as he tried to sell the bill and sell the measure. This is what Amy was just talking about. He told one lawmaker concerned about the secrecy of the trade agreements that once lawmakers approve it, details will be declassified and made public. Kind of like we don't know what's in the law until we actually pass it, which I believe is what Ms. Pelosi said to lawmakers to pass Obamacare, so they can find out what's in it, actually, is what she said. So, Carl, what do you make of all this?
We elected these people to lead for us. I think we should have just a little bit of input. I mean, how can they make it? There's nothing classified about this. It's not a military operation. Let us know. I mean, what? Come on now.
And it impacts 316 million Americans.
Exactly,
So there we
and
are.
our money.
I love the confusion over this, because usually, you know, the more partisan folks, the ones that just speak strictly from ideology, want to say, like, this is the president being secretive again, or this is the Republicans being secretive again. No one knows what to make of this, because it's the president with Republicans.
Funny, I know. I like it. It makes it
weird.
fun. I mean, I'll be honest. Even if it were public, I probably wouldn't read every word of it. I mean, come on.
But does that, do you
I haven't read.
But would
I
you
haven't-
want it to be
I haven't read
under
the-
lock and
I haven't
seal?
read the tax code either. If I'm
But
really,
Ellison,
really
honestly,
being,
would
really
you want it to
being
be
honest
under
here.
lock and seal?
Here's what I have to tell you. I'm a little agnostic on the question. I mean, I understand in the long run we have to have free trade in this nation, right? We've got to have
Global economy.
exchange stuff with other nations. In the long run, we're better off. There are pains attached to it, but I get the feeling this is going to pass. It kind of feels like it's going in that direction, and it's
But why should it be
probably
secret?
we're probably better off with it. I don't know.
You don't know why it should be secret?
No one else has been secret. I haven't heard a word from Mrs. Hillary Clinton on this. She
Oh.
hasn't come down one way or another
Because
on
that
it.
would be awkward, because her husband promoted free
NAFTA.
trade and NAFTA, and
Right.
she's running for the Democratic nomination in a primary that is and she's lurching to the left. So I think she's being politically smart by keeping her lips zipped on this, because it's going to happen, and she's not
She
voting
doesn't talk
on
to the
it.
press anyway, so it doesn't
Right,
really
she's
matter.
not talking.
That's
So
true.
it's politically
Yeah.
smart.
Bernie Sanders actually called her out today and said she has to come down one way or another, and I saw that sot everywhere. And while
Right.
Sanders isn't polling close to her, he's getting closer. You know, he's not a threat yet, but by him just speaking out that way, then all the news organizations pick it up, and that will put pressure on her
It's the
eventually.
usefulness of Bernie, right? I mean, you're absolutely right. He's not going to be the nominee, but you know what? He's advancing interesting issues. He's pushing the party a little to the left in the same way that some of the Republicans are going to push Jeb Bush to the right. I mean, that's what this process
These
is
kind of
about.
things happen all the time. You look at like XM Bank, for instance, hundreds of billions of dollars allotted, and yet nobody knows anything about it. Nobody's ever heard of XM Bank, yet they're voting for hundreds of billions of dollars of our money for corporate welfare. So, I mean, these things happen all the time. This one just happened to grab the
The
news.
defense budget would be the same way, right?
Well, the defense budget is a very different story.
There are actually like national
totally
security
different.
issues.
Totally
and
different.
things.
Totally
And
different.
unfortunately, China knows everything about our federal employees,
now they
so that's
do,
a problem.
yeah.
But Ellison, the question is, do you think Hillary should be answering questions on this?
You know what? I think the media ought to press her. I think candidates ought to dodge things to whatever their benefit is. It'll have whatever impact. I mean, it's theater, right? I mean, this isn't
So you don't have an opinion
actual
personally,
politics.
if she should
No,
answer.
I do. I'm a reporter. I want people to reveal everything. I'm against secrets of all times, in all cases,
you wanna know-
including the defense budget, by the way.
You want ISIS to know where our nuclear
I
warheads are stored?
I believe in an open
Wow,
society,
Ellis,
and
you're
I'll
gonna
take
get
I'll take the
everybody
cost of it. But you know what? Because that's where I sit. I mean, I'm a free expression journalist guy, and I understand there's a lot of people who are on the secrecy side of that. And in our great society, that stuff all kind of
Unless
comes
you
out in the
wouldn't last
wash.
5
doesn't
seconds
it?
in a war.
Huh?
You wouldn't last 5
You know
seconds
what?
in a
Maybe
war.
that's why I'm not a soldier.
Right, and I'm going to back out of this war.
That's why I'm not a soldier.
We're backing out altogether, actually. I just want to remind you guys that in the next 3 weeks, the president's legacy could possibly be decided. Because if this trade deal doesn't pass, and the Iran deal falls through, and ISIS gets worse, and there was another one, Obamacare could be shot down.
And immigration.
Yeah, just in 3 weeks, the whole legacy
The whole
goes away.
world could go down.
Anyway, this is the Daily Wrap. Great show so far. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Daily Wrap. As usually the part of the show, we go around the table, share our favorite stories of the day, but tonight I thought we'd do something a little bit different. This deserves an entire block. You're in a block right now, and it goes on for 6 minutes. Anyway, we were discussing this before, and this is about the Fox debate that's coming up, where they're choosing the top 10 candidates based on aggregate polling. right? And if you're below those 10, and there's something like 37 running, if you're below those 10, then you don't get to be part of this debate. Fox will then hold a second debate. I don't know if you guys follow basketball. It's like the NCAA tournament and then the NIT. There'll be the leftover candidates will then be on like a morning show, and then they could debate each other.
The kiddie table.
The kiddie table. Thank you. So here is my idea. All right, and this is where Fox can triple their ratings, where it's fair to everybody and all candidates. It's quite simple. We go back to our sports analogies. There's an NBA lottery. They put a bunch of balls into one of those little lottery things, and it spits out balls. You assign a number to each candidate. 8 come out. That's your Tuesday night debate. Doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Jeb Bush, frontrunner Marco Rubio, or it's Fiorina, Trump, Kasich, Jindal. Doesn't matter. All right. So 8 on one side. That's your one debate. Wednesday night, the next 8 debate. Okay. So suddenly, if you're Fox, because debates do huge numbers, you have twice the ratings.
Because it's suspenseful. You don't know who's going to be up there.
Exactly.
Do you do it in advance? How long before do they know?
Exactly. So
That day?
That's my third part. All right. So 3 weeks beforehand.
3 weeks.
You do what ESPN does and CBS does with the NCAA tournament, and you do a selection show. And you have Shep Smith and Megyn Kelly, and they host, and the balls come out. You're like Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Carly Fiorina, and then you have a whole panel there to analyze the matchups.
Yeah, but why are
That's
we-
another ratings
Do you know
killer.
the name, by the way? Yolanda Vega.
Yolanda Vega.
You know who that is?
I do know.
She's the person. You know that name?
No.
In New York, who pulls out the
right.
Yolanda Vega.
That's right.
We should get her.
Exciting.
We can get her.
Yeah.
Get her.
But here's my question. Why are we producing for Fox News from Newsmax? I think the debate should be here.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, it's a
I
Newsmax.
don't know if we have room. We have 4 here, but we
I would
could rent a
also
hall.
say, I would also
We
say
tried to
there's
make
there's
that
a bit of a challenge to your analogy to how balls in sports are fair, given Tom Brady and the deflated ball controversy. How can
don't
we
wanna go there.
know? How can we know that all of those balls have integrity?
Well, it's
How are
funny
we gonna
because
know?
I wrote this for Mediaite today, and I did get some comments that there's going to be one candidate that says that this thing was fixed in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
But even though
Yes.
everybody's getting
But
into a
now-
debate, though, so
Right.
what does anybody care?
There's
Here's what I
kind
want
of-
to see. You want to boost ratings right off the bat. We do a yay or nay at the end of our show. You have 5 questions that are simple yes or no answers from every single
politicians
person.
never-
Yeah. So you
they
know
never
what? Yes
go
or no
there.
answers. Don't give them. You give them 1 second to answer. Yay or nay. Bam. Buzz
You
back.
would need a hook to get
Yep.
him to
There's
stop
kind
talking.
of, the
Yeah.
truth is, but there's kind of no good answer to it. I mean, when you have 18 candidates and counting,
There'll be 16. 16.
yeah, but the analogy works better with 18.
Okay. Well, you can still split it in half with 8, or you want to go 18.
Why does it
and
work
nine.
better with
Well, you can do 8,
18?
Yeah, I'm
9,
actually
and then
curious
just
about
fill me
that.
in
Just
on
the
the ninth.
Duggar
and
Okay,
then-
done.
Duggar? The
the-
family with
the
all the
Duggars?
kids.
I don't even want to
18
hear about
kids
them.
and counting, 18 candidates.
I don't
and
watch
counting.
Wow,
reality.
you've gone
TV.
sideways
Yeah.
twice during this. But it's fair because no one can say, "See, you left me out." And then Fox
Yeah.
benefits or whatever network benefits. I mean,
Right.
CNN can do this, MSNBC can do it, Newsmax can do this. It doesn't matter, and everybody gets involved. What do you guys think? I don't know how much time we have, but
I like the randomness of it. I think
you
that's
do,
great.
right?
Yeah, and the visuals of the that all
suspense.
bubbling. That's
Bernie
great.
Sanders actually proposed doing inter-party
Right, that
debates.
should be fun.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be fun.
Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump. I would kill. I paid $100 for the Mayweather fight. I would pay
no.
$200 to see that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
Or
even
Cruz
the
Sanders.
hair,
What?
just
Cruz
cutting the
Sanders.
hair.
That would be interesting, right? That would be interesting.
Trump O'Malley on the metric system. And
Quit
I'm-
mentioning
Clinton.
Trump.
Or
Trump
Trump
is dragging you guys down.
What's that?
Trump Clinton, I'd pay $100 to see that.
Oh, that would be
He would
tremendous.
tear her out. He would tear her apart.
It would be entertaining.
Should we be treating him like a real candidate, you think?
He's in the
Of
top
course
10.
not.
No, but
No, I
he
know.
can debate with the best of them, though. He is a mean
I'm with
SOB.
you. Amy and I are like, no.
Yeah, but you know what? Oftentimes, even the long shots are great debaters, smart, funny, entertaining, and they challenge the other quote unquote front runners who've gotten a little bit lazy because of all the support
Right.
they're
That is
getting.
Carly Fiorina, I think.
She's great.
I
She's
wouldn't want to be
real.
in her debate.
She's
No.
real.
She is.
She's got stuff to
I mean,
say.
they come to the debate, loaded for bear.
Absolutely.
Donald
And then
don't,
Rick
right?
Perry may not. I mean, he,
You remember Joe Biden back in 2008? He was
Great.
fantastic. He was
great.
great. I don't think he even got a single digit in the primary, but on the debate stage, he was fantastic.
against
say.
Palin, he actually lost that debate in the eyes of some.
No, I'm talking about the Democratic primary. Do you
What's-
remember?
Oh, right,
Joe
right.
Biden on the stage was great.
No, he's tremendous, and that's
Yeah.
why I'd like to see him run.
He's
here.
likable.
I don't see why he
Very.
doesn't run.
He'd make a great candidate and not a great president.
Yeah, I could agree with
He's
that.
a rocky candidate. He's a
I mean,
loose
anybody's
cannon.
better than what we got now.
I
so.
walked into the 7-Eleven and all the Indian accents. I mean,
But you know
I
what,
mean,
it's
it is entertaining.
He's
It
authentic.
is.
Don't we like authenticity?
Right.
He was the one during the last
Campaign
election
managers
season.
don't
I
like
like it.
authenticity.
I'm all for authenticity.
He was the one during the last election season that used the line most that really resonated with the low information voter, which is GM is alive and Bin Laden is dead. That was him. He keeps it simple. He's likable to a certain extent. I don't know why he wouldn't run here outside of age, or maybe he doesn't think he could win.
Newt
but
Gingrich, 2012, long shot, great debater.
Great debater. Yeah, that's
debater.
true.
Yep,
Got him a
agreed.
TV
Bring it
job.
on.
Anyway, okay, well, that's
that
my
TV
idea.
show
Take
do?
it or leave it. Not too good. Up next, Crossfire 2.0. It's time for Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap. It's happy time, people. That's right. It's time for Yay or Nay. Welcome back to Daily Wrap. First up, firefighters in upstate New York were minding their own business, just doing their job last week when they spotted a drone, and they weren't very happy about it. Here's how it went down. Local man heard about a fire and decided to fly said drone over the house to film all the excitement. We have the video, as you can see. Firefighters down below, they see the drone. One guy tells his other buddy, hey, look at that, and why don't we get rid of the darn thing? And then boom, here we go, a lot of water, and then the drone is basically flying away at that point. So that's basically the rule, that don't fly a drone over a house where firefighters are, because they will spray it with water in these situations. So the owner of the now damaged drone wants the local fire department to pay for repairs to the drone. It's over $2,000. Should he get paid? Yay or nay?
If he wasn't endangering anybody, sure.
Yay, that's property damage. It's legal to fly a drone. And is that really any different than all the news copters that fly over a fire here in New York City for live footage?
It's a very good point Amy makes.
No, when it comes to drone, I am firmly in favor of government regulation. The market is not solving this problem.
Well,
You
government
gotta say,
regulation-
get your drones away
he
from the
didn't-
fire.
He didn't.
do it. He
I was
wasn't-
going to
Get your
say.
drones
He wasn't
away.
endangering anybody. That was
He
just
didn't
some
break the
fireman who was
law.
like, let me screw this guy.
Right, and under the law, you can fly a drone
You'll-
over 50 feet above anybody's house. I mean, I think it's creepy. Your next door neighbor could fly a drone over your backyard while you're sunning yourself
pro
and live
regulation for
stream it if
drones?
he wants.
That's a very good point.
So,
We got to
it's
move
legal.
on. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld says millennials are too politically correct for his liking. The 61-year-old star, he's 61 years old. I'm getting old.
so young.
Told ESPN radio host Colin Cowherd while promoting the latest season of his web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, that he's even been warned by other comedians not to do the college circuit because they're just too PC. More from Amy Holmes in a moment. He even added that his own 14-year-old daughter uses terms like racist and sexist and doesn't really know what the hell she's talking about. Is Seinfeld right? Are millennials too sensitive? Are we too PC?
Yes, millennials, old people, left, right, everybody today is too PC. Although, by the way, I do think that if they paid more on the college campuses, Jerry might be willing to go.
You think so?
He makes more in Vegas than he would at any
Okay.
college
I
campus.
kind of stole your line, but go ahead.
I thought that was my line.
No,
Is that your line?
you know, I love to share. Jerry Seinfeld, I take his point for sure about college campuses being too PC. He might cross a line. The next thing you know, Twitter, Instagram, everything's blowing up. He's all over the internet for what he said because of YouTube, and then it just becomes a controversy and a headache, and he doesn't need it, nor does his publicist. So why bother? Especially when you have that car collection on the Upper East Side.
Yeah.
I think I'd just rather ride around in a Ferrari.
Which you do.
I have done, and it is fun.
Okay, very good.
Society is too PC, but send them there and pay them extra because I want to see how many people get offended by it because I think we need to break those social lines.
This is my philosophy on Seinfeld. If the show Seinfeld existed today, there would be protests and it would probably be taken off the air with some of the topics that he tackled. And that was only in the 90s. That's how much things
So
have changed.
play it back to back now. We need it.
Have you seen any old In Living Color? That would never be allowed on air these days. Never.
Watch The Jeffersons sometime, where
Chappelle.
they openly use the N-word. That were, I believe, whoever their neighbors were, I forgot the name of the neighbors, calls Mr. Jefferson an N-word. And like the laugh track goes and everything.
Well,
It's
Django, that
bizarre.
movie Django, everybody, it all hit the fan when that movie came out.
That's true.
Who
Let's
cares?
move
It's a
on.
movie. It's a good movie.
In what reads like a page out of The Onion, a Huffington Post op-ed explores the idea of fast-tracking known atheists through airport security, since, get this, they don't tend to bomb or hijack planes. The author actually wrote, we have it up on screen, as an atheist, my beliefs do not make me a fundamentalist. In fact, fact, they make the exact opposite. I couldn't help but wonder if I really had to wait in an hour-plus lines, since no atheist, so far as I can discover, has ever been accused of bombing or hijacking a plane. Remember, the Huffington Post is the most widely read publication on the internet for politics, and they actually printed this. So basically I could say, I'm an atheist, and they let me through? Quickly.
I think that's profiling, and so therefore I'm against it.
Okay, quickly.
One word for this columnist, Unabomber. I believe he was an atheist. I mean, he was sort of a pantheist. You read his manifesto, but
good.
I don't think he actually believed in traditional religion as we know it.
You're good. Down to 5 seconds.
How many veterans have blown up planes recently?
So you should be fast-tracked as well. I think a lot of people should be fast-tracked.
I want to keep my shoes on.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Because I smelt your feet and it's not fair.
Exactly.
All right, panel, great job tonight. Great having you all. We appreciate it. J.D. Hayworth, Newsmax Prime, that's next.